Did you know that one firearm literally changed the course of history forever? Imagine one invention capable of toppling empires, rewriting borders, and altering the face of global warfare. Stick around, because this is a story you won't believe is true. All right, let's rewind to 1498. Europe was flourishing in the Renaissance while medieval warfare was undergoing massive shifts. Spears, swords, and longbows dominated the battlefield. Fortresses stood mighty with towering stone walls. Armies clashed in cumbersome gear, and wars were slow and methodical. Then came the invention that slammed its fist on the table of history, the matchlock musket. Now, before I lose you, let me tell you why this isn't just your average history lesson. The musket didn't just get invented. It detonated a chain reaction that changed everything. Here's the clincher. With this single weapon, the age of knights on horseback dwindled into nothingness. Why? Because suddenly, even a common foot soldier could stop a galloping knight dead in his tracks, and at a distance no less. Think about that. One random farmhand training for a few months could bring down a warrior class that dominated for centuries. Crazy, isn't it? Let's dig deeper. The matchlock musket introduced an accessible mechanism that made handheld firearm use dramatically easier. Before this, early firearms were cumbersome and wildly unreliable. But the matchlock system introduced a lock mechanism, making it possible to fire the gun by pulling a trigger. The trigger, in turn, activated a serpentine holding a lit match, which ignited the gunpowder and propelled the shot. If that already seems revolutionary, imagine this. These muskets were far easier and faster to produce than traditional war tools like crossbows or ornate suits of armor. Suddenly, entire armies could be outfitted with guns capable of piercing armor. The battlefield shifted overnight. Cities had to rethink their defensive strategies entirely. Stone walls were no longer impregnable. The musket won the day, and it truly had just begun. From 15th century to 16th century Europe, handheld firearms like the matchlock reshaped conflict everywhere they appeared. The mighty samurai of Japan? Even these vaunted warriors were eventually forced to adapt to firearms under the leadership of military titans like Oda Nobunaga. Meanwhile, in the kingdoms of the Middle East and India, rulers like the Ottoman sultans rapidly incorporated muskets into their war machines. Pause and let that sink in. For thousands of years, battles were decided largely by heavily armored elites, knights, warriors, or samurai on horseback. These iconic figures were the superweapons of their age, standing head and shoulders above the common infantry, literally and figuratively. Then, within just decades of the musket's arrival, this all changed. Castle walls couldn't offer absolute protection. Riding into battle on horseback became significantly riskier. In fact, many historians agree that firearms like the matchlock effectively ushered in the end of the medieval period. You might be wondering, how does such a weapon stack up by today's standards? Well, compared to modern firearms, the matchlock musket was laughably slow and wildly inaccurate. Loading it required pouring gunpowder, positioning a lead ball, tamping it down with a ramrod, and then lighting that serpentine with a slow-burning match. All of this had to happen before you could finally fire one single shot. You wouldn't win any modern firefights with it, but back then it was literally a super weapon. But here's another pivotal twist. It wasn't just military battles that changed, it was society as a whole. That's right. Simple muskets had a ripple effect onto politics, economics, and even cultural mindsets. Here's an example. European feudal systems traditionally relied on the wealth and power of a noble class maintaining private armies. These armies were dominated by knights, essentially symbolic of a hierarchical pyramid-shaped society. But when a sea of common musketeers could suddenly take down knights, it equalized military campaigns in a way previously thought impossible. Armies became larger, and monarchs began centralizing the command of power, giving rise to powerful nation-states. The old feudal systems started crumbling bit by bit. Speaking of mind-blowing twists, let's not forget something. You see, while Europe was rapidly moving towards muskets, these weapons started subtly blending into the global canvas. When the Portuguese introduced matchlocks into Japan in the mid-1500s, they didn't just stop warfare changes, they altered Japan's global interactions. The rigid feudal kingdom adapted guns so enthusiastically that in some respects, their firearm production outpaced that of Europe within a few decades. By the early 1600s, however, Japan pivoted, isolating itself and banning firearm production for nearly 2 centuries. Isn't that fascinating? A country that had mastered this disruptive technology deliberately chose to suppress it, perhaps fearing its effects would destabilize their samurai-led hierarchy. Meanwhile, in the West, gunpowder weapons continued to evolve. Matchlocks gave way to wheel locks, then flintlocks. Eventually, firearms became the hyper-efficient tools we're familiar with today, capable of unimaginable precision, speed, and firepower. But never forget, it all started with those relatively crude, tinder-lit muskets. Today, when you look at world history, whether you're thinking of Christopher Columbus navigating the New World, the conquests of European empires, or even the American Revolution, you'll find firearms at the heart of the story. Indeed, when citizens of multiple American colonies stood up to mighty British forces in 1775, many of them did so armed with muskets. Without these guns, there might not have been a new republic forged by that revolution. Ponder this. One simple armament helped tip the course to one of the most consequential events in human history. And when you walk past a gun museum or see historical recreations in film, take a moment to realize you're looking at an invention not merely of war, but of transformation. Matchlocks changed power dynamics on every scale, from local lords to competing empires, from individual skirmishes to global revolutions. So, as we wrap up, here's your takeaway. The musket did something no other invention of its era could. It democratized destruction. For better or worse, it enabled the little guy to challenge the powerful, both literally on the battlefield and figuratively in society. It's the weapon that turned the tide against the elites of the medieval world and ushered in the modern era. Still think a musket is just an old, obsolete gun? Think again. That primitive firearm lit with a flaming wick sparked a revolution that still echoes through time. If that isn't remarkable, I don't know what is. And now, when someone asks you about firearms' impact on history, you'll know exactly where it all began.